Ibrahim, I'm also sometimes asked whether there is a competition between Warsaw and Istanbul. But you know, I think that in a sense, this competition may arise in future because, well, I completely agree when you say that you have a lot of companies or businesses which can go and wish to go public. This is more or less also our case, but the problem is that capital which would be willing to invest is limited. This is limited regionally, well, on the nation level, regionally, and even globally. It is limited,
well,
and it has a lot of place where are investable assets. So, you know, our, well, strategy, which we, well, we do not hide this, is to invite this capital to our market. And what we are afraid of, that it could be deterred from inflowing into Poland for whatever reason. So this state of competition may appear. Giorgio, excuse me, but you know, we have two very active panelists. So I let Ibrahim to comment with one phrase, and then Ibrahim?
Only a few words. I doubt that the capital is limited, first. Given that the series of QEs will continue like this, for a foreseeable future at least, central banks are providing continuously liquidity, and already, even as of now, there is an abundant amount of liquidity. For the time being, for the sake of liquid markets, they are still, quote unquote, flying to the quality. But what kind of a quality is this? I mean, at the end of the day, what you invest is the either repayment capacity of a sovereign, which is related to the tax revenue, which is a function of the growth ultimately, or the profitability of companies, again a function of the growth. I mean, and where is the growth? Where is the future of the global economy? I used to work at the central bank. I attended several G20 meetings, believe me. I mean, when I sit around that table and look in the face of people, I mean, what I was seeing is that for mature economies, I mean, they are really serious problems. And they expect someone like Messiah to come and save the global economy, and that is emerging markets. Right. And we are the emerging markets. So I am sure, Ludwig, don't worry, there will be more than enough liquidity in the future.
And by the way, this can be a great opportunity for Cyprus. They can create a futures market and sell Polish IPO futures and Turkish IPO futures, and make money on that competition.
Okay, it must be said, Georgia represents a rather small market, but important. And Cyprus will take up the presidency of European Union, which is, well, you are quite a small island, but you will, well, you will have your voice over, you know, a land of over 500 million people. So
we are 500,000 people.
500,000.
Yeah, 700 actually.
And great football clubs.
Yes, we managed to have a team.
The semi-final.
Semi-finals. Yeah. And so I come from another region. I come from
of Champions League, for those of you who.
And I come from South Eastern Europe. It's another Europe. You know, we are very close connected with Greece. Everybody was wondering what's going to happen to Greece. We know something about Greece because we are Greek as well. One must study the Greek mythology to find out what is the future of Greece. Just outside Athens, there is a village called Delphi. The people used to go there to have the future tellers, to ask them what's going to happen in the future. So the situation that we are now, we have to wait for the general election in Greece to see what Greek people decide and what Greek people want. Now, regarding the financial sector, etc., Cyprus, it is a financial center. It's a home to tremendous amounts of capital. normally from Russia, Ukraine, and other countries. And those monies are invested in all countries, UK and America and Russia and Poland. And because they exploit the geopolitical taxation advantages that Cyprus offers. And we think that the future for Cyprus now is to develop a funds industry to attract those money to be invested in funds in Cyprus, to be listed there. So Cyprus is there to help the biggest financial centers.
But what is, well, what's the future ahead of such markets as you are? How you define your strategy or your perspective for?
I put the question whether there is a future for small national exchanges, having in mind what is going on around consolidations, mergers, acquisitions. And a previous Nasdaq CEO said some years ago, said that every country needs an army, an exchange, and something else. So, and I'm wondering whether this statement still applies. In my opinion, provided that an exchange finds its way, finds its niche market, there is a future. In our case, we paid a lot of attention to the small and medium enterprises. We have created a specialized market with less regulation and some advantages, still complying with some sort of corporate governance and transparency, etc. And we found that this market is very, very popular, not only for Cypriot companies, but also for companies outside Cyprus. And now that in Cyprus you have detected some hydrocarbons, natural gas, and seeing what happened to Israel when they discovered natural gas there, it seems that there is a future in our market to help those companies to raise capital and to give investors the opportunity to invest in that on our exchange.
We are here three very different, well, with all similarities, basic or less basic, we have here three very different market venues with all the surroundings and local, regional, and global presence, as this is the case of Nasdaq OMX, which is, well, kind of global exchange. I wonder.
I hope so.
Yeah, you are.
No, I know.
You can be sure.
We're really the only national. We're the only global brand at this point.
If not you, who else? But
finish your point. I want to.
Yeah, no. My point will not be too original, because I wonder what are now the main factors pushing companies to choose this or that marketplace in order to, well, build its or their future. As I assume that they understand much more than the general public what Mr. Fruer said at the very beginning, that well, having a debut is only the beginning of the whole story. So what are now the factors, the driving factors or the drivers for issuers where they have much more of a choice, as all the flows are very liberal and you know, the technology is magical, and the regulations are very similar between countries, enabling much higher volumes of cross-border transactions than 10 years ago. So what now may be a decisive, a set of decisive factors for companies which now consider where to list, where to build its public presence in order to have the access to capital. I start this question with Professor Wierzbowski, but I'd like to ask all of you to answer to this question. The question is not very innovative, so I would strongly require you to give innovative answers to this question.
Generally, companies going public, they look for liquidity, they look for investors in reality. It's not the question of the exchange, it's the question where the investors are who will invest their money. And the approach may be different. If we have huge company which may expect attraction of the investors worldwide, probably this would look for major markets. On the other hand, small and medium-sized companies, they usually look for local investors because, frankly speaking, small companies are usually traded on local markets and they have mostly local investors. On the other hand, they will try to go up as much as possible to get to other exchanges because they have a feeling that investors going through blue chips, checking how blue chips perform on the screen, if they find on their way something smaller but with good prospects, they may decide to invest into small companies. I believe that all the exchanges sitting here are successful. Of course they are different. Even if you are not afraid of Cyprus, looking what Cyprus is doing in other aspects, how much Polish money went to Cyprus, I think they have really good prospects. On the other hand, there are a number of exchanges which have disappeared in reality. Our exchange has been set up following the pattern of French exchange in Lyon, which does not exist anymore. So virtually, it's almost like in foreign legion. Either you march ahead, you are dynamically developing exchange, or there is a danger that you would disappear one day.